Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the 2015 Vintage Report. We have a large room. I think it's the biggest room we have had so far, so we're very pleased to have you today. I hope you'll spend a great day. I wanted to start with a huge thank you to our sponsors and partners, because this day, it's the 6th conference we're doing this year, and this day is possible also because they help us supporting this event. So all those guys share the same DNA of the conference, which is all about innovation in viticulture and enology. So we have Bank of the West, who is our gold sponsor, and they've been partnering with us for the last 3 years now, creating this innovation award that will speak this afternoon. We have HNA Financing as silver sponsor, and you'll find them in the innovation corner, which is just on the fairway deck, where we're going to have all the breaks and the lunch and the wine and beer tasting. And all our bronze sponsors, and I'm going to name them all. So we have Terravion, we have Lafort, we have Massilva, Berthommieux Hermitage, Tonnellerie Berger et Fils, Dynamax. We have Tout de Suite, who is providing the live stream. I'm going to speak about it in a few seconds. And we have Sellotape. So Sellotape has printed all the material that you have today. The table tents, the magnets, everything is NFC encoded. That means that if you have an iPhone, an Android, you can use the NFC, enable it with NFC, and it's going to direct you directly to a page where you're going to be able to answer some questions about the day. So it's a little survey. I'll speak about it at the end of the day because I need you to answer those questions. I promise I keep it short, but that's thing that's very, very important. We get your opinion on the talks, on the content, on the day, so that we can also improve year after year. And of course, we have Fruition Sciences as a partner with organizing the event. I wanted to talk quickly also about the social networks, because I invite you, if you are on Facebook or Twitter, to follow the Vintage Reports. We have a dedicated Facebook page and a dedicated Twitter page, and that'd be great if you follow us with news and also post. Don't hesitate to post about today and retweet, that'd be great. The Vintage Report. So I just wanted to quickly talk about what is that conference. So we created the Vintage Report in 2010 in Napa, here, with the idea that we needed an event to bring together scientists with winemakers and vineyard managers, so that together we can know what are the latest advances and know how we can improve our winemaking practices overall. And the very first year we had 90 attendees, and that showed us that that was a great idea. So we needed to focus on that. And so over the years we've introduced more Vintage Report conferences, and Seb will talk about it, but we have now 4 locations in the world, and it's going to expand in the next few years. We are 200 people today here, so that's the largest attendance so far. We were again sold out, so again, thank you so much. And we have a high satisfaction rate, so I hope today will be even better than 95%. We'll see. But the conference, as I said, it's creating a hub for you to connect about innovation and take a step back. I know you're so busy doing a lot of things in the vineyards, in the cellar, and this idea, this day is all about seeing what's new and up and coming in the viticulture and enology. So we have great scientists today who will talk about the latest research and advances, but innovation also comes from you guys, and so this is why we're going to have a panel at the end of the morning, as well as the Innovation Awards. So this is a competition that we started 2 years ago. So it's the 3rd one now, and the idea is to give you an incentive to share what you're doing, because a lot of initiatives, a lot of things are done in the vineyards or during the vintage, and that may be worth sharing with the peers. So this Innovation Award is all about sharing what you're doing and giving you an incentive to do and create and try. So we have a winner that we will announce this afternoon, and I give you I hope great interest in participating next year and submitting an application. And the innovation also comes from the suppliers. This is why you have an innovation corner. And you have also just on the right, on the fairway deck, a wall of startup. And the idea was to introduce new startups that are just launched, that you don't know or maybe don't know yet, but to show you what's up and coming. And so this wall of startup features Innovint. And you have a little video to watch, 2 minutes. It's very great. And last but not least, innovation comes from students and new, fresh, fresh blood. And so we're going to have 2 students who are going to pitch their PhD. So they're going to talk about their research, and they're going to have 3 minutes to give you great enthusiasm about their research. The Vintage Report, it's also a website where you can go and find a lot of resources. So vintagereport.com, don't hesitate, you have a lot of information on that website, including, and that's new, a TV. So all the talks from last year and from this year will be or are on the website, so that you can always go back and watch some of the talks that were of interest, and it's available for you at any time. So don't hesitate to go over there. This year, a new innovation is that this day is live streamed. It's powered by Tootsuite. They are over here. Thank you very much for doing that. And so that, because we were sold out, people who couldn't attend the day could watch the conference as well. And with no further ado, Sébastien.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sebastian, and I'm the co-founder of Fruition Sciences with Thibaut Scolache, who is going to moderate the event today. And so what I'm going to do now is just give you a brief summary of what we talked about last year, just to give you some context. And before that, just quickly, coming back at what we did in France last December. So we did our first vintage report for 2015. And so in Bordeaux, we had some great speakers with Jean-Claude Berrouet, who did the introduction, Keith Van Leeuwen, who talked about the vintage, and then some scientists who talked about spatial extrapolation and other subjects. And it was also really interesting to talk about the vintage in Bordeaux, because 2015, as some of you may know, is a great vintage in Bordeaux. After this event, we'll have an event in Paso Robles. So for Paso, it's our second year. So we are very excited to have this event in a couple of weeks. And then, last but not least, we'll have our event in southern France, in Narbonne, where we'll talk about the 2015 vintage for the southern region, Languedoc-Roussillon, in France. And here it should be about 100 people, like we have every year. So what did we talk about last year, about last vintage in 2014? So first, Thibaut did the overview. He moderated like he is going to do today. And he concluded his speech last year talking about the vintage map. So he'll do the same this year. And what was really interesting about the 2014 vintage was that it was a winemaker vintage, really good for dry farm vineyards with large root reservoir. And really what we saw was that the impact of your practices was extreme and had really strong influences on maturation profile, with the fact that also we had some very early sugar accumulation. So we'll see if this year is similar. what was interesting too was that, so you see 2014 is here. I don't know if you can see it, the small yellow here. So that means that it was vintage year, because this is the quadrant where you want to be for a vintage year, and with very few VPD heat waves event. So really interesting for winemakers. Then we had Martin Mendes Costavel, who talked about the drought in California, and explained that in 2009 and 2010 they were able to do an experiment using tarp to create drought during the winter, and really looking at the consequences in terms of yield, primary metabolite and secondary metabolite like aromas. And so what we saw was that the tarp, the drought during the winter had a strong influence on the lower yield. Primary metabolite like sugar also were lower. And in terms of secondary metabolite, he showed these two graphs where the red one is with the rain exclusion. And so what's interesting is that in 2009, the impact was not that great, but in 2010, we see that the red lines is inside the black, which means that the aromas were not as developed in 2010. So definitely an influence of the winter drought. So we'll see what happened in 2015 in terms of the influence of the drought between 2012 and 2015. He also talked about what are the measurement techniques for water deficit, and so stomatal conductance, sap flow, surface renewal, and remote sensing. So he just did a brief summary of that. From there, we talked with Alexander Levin. We talked about the cultivars and their affinity toward water. And he showed that different cultivars have different affinities. And so on this curve here, you see the green line are cultivars that have a strong affinity to water, so are very sensitive to water deficit. The red line is more like neutral, and blue line are insensitive, so very resistant to water deficit. And what he showed is that the sensitive group, so the green line, is very sensitive to early water deficit, which strongly impacts berry size and amount of sugar in the grapes. From there, we had Anne Letayev talking about studying basically chemical analysis, winemaking extraction, and physical properties of skin and berry. And she did that in an experiment in 2014 for Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot in Napa, Central Valley, and Central Coast. And the take-home really was that for the skin weight and skin elasticity, basically she saw no varietal effect on the physical properties, and really mainly the physical properties of the grape and the skin were affected by climate. Then we had Laurent Deluc, who had a very interesting and controversial talk about the link between uneven flowering and uneven ripening. And what he showed was that basically, even if you have an uneven flowering, the grapes inside the cluster have different maturation rates, which lead to a uniformization of the maturity inside the cluster as you're getting closer to harvest. And so at the end of the day, what he concluded was that it's not that bad to have an uneven flower. Then we had Gregory Jones. So Gregory Jones is going to talk again today. And I mean, that was really interesting because he was kind of the guru of the session, talking about the past vintage, but also telling us what was going to happen in 2015. So we'll see if he was right. And two graphs were really interesting. The first one on the left here is you can see the 2014 vintage just at the right of the graph. And so that really means that the 2014 vintage was already really atypical and very, very warm. And so we'll see if the 2015 vintage is followed the same trend. And then he also talked about the influence of the temperature of the Pacific on the climate in California. And so we'll see, especially as you know, it's a El Niño year, so we'll see how this is going to pan out for 2016. After that, we had Walt Mahaffey, who really did present some very novel approaches to understand dispersions of particles like pollen or fungi in the vineyard. And his approach is novel because he merges aerodynamics, architecture of the vineyard, and disease models. And so here, for example, you can see a model where you see particles, treatments for fungi who are dispersing into the air as the turbulence of the vineyard is affecting it. And basically, really the goal of his presentation was to show that understanding better how the particles are diffused in the vineyard can help us reducing treatments. And finally, we had Gary Tilkian coming and presenting the Metropolitan Water District point of view for the city of Los Angeles. And really, obviously, last year there was a dire drought in California and in Los Angeles. And so he presented methods for a city to decrease water use. So obviously, there were the regulatory options, innovation conservation program. And here, I think what was very interesting in his presentations is that he showed that viticulture is really at the forefront in terms of innovation programs to decrease water use in agriculture. Since we know that 70 to 80% of water use is in agriculture, it's very important. And then it showed some of the incentives and rebates programs that are used in cities to decrease water use, for loans or car wash and all these kind of things. And basically, his conclusion was that all of these systems work since LA was able to save 20% in the summer 2014. And so that was kind of a positive message in this dire situation.